Venezuela and Colombia should reunite in Great Colombia, as we face the same threat of invasion from the United States. We should pursue complete economic and military unity. Later on, would be invited to join Panama, Ecuador, Guyana, and Trinidad and Tobago to recover the original territory that shared political unity during the Spanish Crown and the early years of independence. United States has been clever in promoting divisions between countries. Panama was separated from Colombia in order to build the Panama Canal. Santander in Colombia fought against Simón Bolivar to divide Colombia from Venezuela, while today's Ecuador is militarizing its northern border with the excuse of combating illegal mining. Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana are also being encouraged by the United States to lend their territory for invasion of Venezuela. Another candidate for Great Colombia would be the beautiful island of Grenada, which is being harassed by the United States for building a radar system in the airport so that they can invade Venezuela more easily. If Great Colombia is achieved as a bilingual international military power with great economic prospects, we could be comparable to major countries such as Mexico, Iran, or India. The size of the new country would be conducive to strength and ample natural and human resources. United States, United Kingdom will certainly try to avoid a reunification of Great Colombia. As we gather strength, we will be able to solve our problems domestically. Relationships between Venezuela and Colombia are better than ever. President Nicolás Maduro expressed that Colombia and Venezuela are twin countries, both liberated by Bolivar, and any United States attack into Colombian territory will be considered as an attack into Venezuela. And Gustavo Petro earlier said that any attack on Venezuela would be an attack on Colombia and the rest of South America. For the time being, our two nations are behaving simultaneously. We shall soon share alliances and military arrangements. Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana are dealing with populations completely in resistance against war, which is being imposed upon them by the United States. The insistence of Guyanese authorities on charging Asruddin Mohammed as an illegal gold trafficker who had business in Venezuela supports this aversion to Latin American and Caribbean unity. The island of Grenada could become a hub for Caribbean and Latin American unity, as it is very close to Margarita Island and very close to St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the rest of the West Indies. Perhaps the Dragon Gas deal could be conducted with Grenada rather than Trinidad and Tobago, considering that Kamla Persaud's regime is absolutely dependent on the United States. Minister of Defense of Venezuela, Vladimir Padrino Lopez, has already expressed his support of Colombia as it is being harassed by the United States, and Venezuelan military will be able to assist Colombia at a moment's notice. Indeed, the treatment of Donald Trump to President of Colombia included lousy language which is not acceptable in diplomatic relations. Gustavo Petro indeed was speaking the truth. He has been accounting nationalities and sheer numbers of extrajudicially executed Trinidadian, Venezuelan, and Colombian nationals. Gustavo Petro considers that the United States is committing wars of crime directly attributable to Donald Trump. President Nicolas Maduro has also suggested that peace must be sought, but defense will be ample and conclusive should the United States invade. During the last few days, Venezuelan defenses have become more robust. Chinese aircraft have been seen flying around United States Navy ships deployed through the Caribbean. Russian missiles are already set on various Venezuelan facilities, pointing to each of the United States Navy vessels in the Caribbean. Should the United States choose to attack Venezuela, missiles from all over the Venezuelan coast and parts of the interior will be fired at hypersonic speeds into United States military vessels protected by self-defense rights with power to significantly damage or destroy such ships. No further news are available about recent incoming Iranian missiles. However, communication remains abundant. At the same time, Russia and China are having issues with the United States, such as a cancelled Trump and Putin meeting and disastrous results on the China-United States trade war, which is prohibiting NVIDIA chips of United States manufacturing into China, while China is severely restricting rare earth exports into the United States. The Russian Duma signed the broad partnership agreement between Venezuela and Russia, which was already approved by the Venezuelan National Assembly. Therefore, Russia, from now on, will deploy into Venezuela all kinds of equipment as if it were domestic Russian territory, while Cuba diplomatically has been providing Venezuela know-how on how to successfully block invasion attempts from the United States. Cuba is probably the most advanced country in the whole world on how to deter United States invasions, as it has successfully been free from United States foreign interference during the last 66 years. President Donald Trump seems more interested in fighting Gustavo Petro rather than fighting Nicolas Maduro, because he has already seen how powerful the Venezuelan military has become. Intrusions into Venezuelan airspace on the part of American planes has been difficult, as they are always received and escorted by Venezuelan planes. And ships are not to enter close proximity of Venezuelan waters because they would be received with missiles. Russian submarines are rumored to be patrolling the area as well. Technology transfer is occurring between Russia and Venezuela, which means that many activities that Russians were executing previously are now being executed by Venezuelan military personnel recently trained, which is learning very fast. And diplomatically, a major breakthrough has occurred from the international community, whose experts in the United Nations have issued a communique prohibiting United States foreign interference into Venezuela. The communique explains that countering drugs and labeling drug traffickers as terrorists violates international law, as such excuses may not be used for extrajudicial killings of civilians. Prime Minister Kamala Persad of Trinidad and Tobago remains silent, and she has been seen celebrating Diwali feast with United States Embassy personnel. Trinidad and Tobago public opinion is concerned that their country right now is being run as a colony of the United States rather than by a prime minister who used to be outspoken and is currently silent. Grenada provides some hope, as there are increasing rumors that the Prime Minister will not approve installation of United States radars at St. George's International Airport. Grenada Civic Society has been vocal, convoking protests and marches similar to what we have seen in the United States last weekend, labeled No Kings. The president of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, has been very vocal as well during the last few days, condemning United States invasion into Venezuela and confirming that South American and Caribbean countries are sovereign and we are not to be ruled by Donald Trump. It is uncertain if the United States assets deployed in the Caribbean will dare to attack Venezuela, as Venezuelan deterrence has become formidable. Public opinion in the United States and in the international community strongly opposes such an invasion. Maintaining so much equipment in the Caribbean costs several $1 million a day, while the United States federal government remains shut down. And suddenly, Donald Trump has decided his next target to be Gustavo Petro of Colombia and the coca plantations present in Colombia, which, according to Gustavo Petro, serve mostly European markets rather than United States. Still, Gustavo Petro has a history of destroying plenty of coca plantations, as reported by United Nations statistics. Attention so far has not gone further south into Ecuador because Noboa is the close ally of United States. However, a lot of drug trafficking comes from Ecuador, and it should be also a target of counter-narcotics efforts. a refueling vessel from the United States crossed from the Caribbean into the Panama Canal in direction of the Pacific, suggesting that the Pacific will become the next target of this counter-narcotics war. However, the methodology used by the United States for drug trafficking should revert to previous Coast Guard emphasis, as this military deployment is not being well seen by the military community of the United States. The admiral of the Southern Command, who recently resigned, while rumors abound that he was actually fired, confirms that United States troops and vessels and airplanes have no clear leadership. There is no objective. We don't know if it's against Venezuela or against Colombia or against both. No United Nations approval, no Senate approval, no public opinion approval. Any escalation is being well deterred, and Donald Trump tries to change his narrative from Venezuela into Colombia. The Colombian president wishes to formalize a penal legal complaint against Donald Trump, while the Venezuelan military continues reporting daily advances in our national defense. Bolivia elections have concluded and a new president, Rodrigo Paz, has been announced as he comfortably won previous second round of elections against Tuto Quiroga. Opening of markets is expected in Bolivia, while indigenous population must quickly learn to adapt and be assertive on the rights they want regarding the Uyuni lithium mine deals. It is important that Bolivia learns how to effectively regulate development of their resources so that they don't fall into Guyana's trap, which provided most of the revenue to international oil companies, and the population of Guyana has yet to see the benefits. Elections in Latin America are increasingly becoming conditioned, as noted by United States interference, which is asking the Argentine population to vote for Javier Milei's party in the forthcoming elections for their Congress, because if the opposition parties of Argentina become a majority, United States will remove loans to Argentina. By the same token, United States authorities are initiating a campaign in Colombia to discredit the party of Gustavo Petro, and they are supporting the opposition so that the opposition is able to perform a regime change in Colombia, just as it has been their methodology used in Venezuela. It is important that Colombia's sovereignty remains protected, and the militaries of Venezuela and Colombia should quickly concur and decide what will be their strategy if the United States continues interfering with their politicians. Colombia has already accepted that the Treaty of Free Commerce will be dismantled with the United States, which really doesn't matter because according to President Petro, most of the benefit arrived to the United States. And by the way, something similar happened in Australia. Prime Minister of Australia recently met with Donald Trump, and he was complaining that United States was already gaining in bilateral trade and that there was no need of tariffs. Tariffs are part of economic war, and the countries of the planet that are affected by tariffs are united to organize, perhaps through the movement of non-aligned countries, to deplore tariffs and start legal proceedings against the United States in the United Nations, because the United States is enabling an economic warfare through tariffs and sanctions. However, sanctions and tariffs are isolating United States, while the countries of the global south are increasingly trading among ourselves. It will be quite interesting, the opening of the embassy of Burkina Faso in Caracas, because Burkina Faso seems the country that best understands how to leverage natural resources to a country's favor. If Venezuela and Burkina Faso, in representation of Latin America and Africa, are able to design a transcontinental trade plan protecting our mining, petroleum, and agricultural resources, and expecting commerce terms favorable to our nations, we will gain respect from the international community. For the time being, Europe continues stuck with their support of Volodymyr Zelensky, who is losing a lot of territory, and Vladimir Putin, while expressing some eagerness to finish the war, has pronounced the wish that Russian forces must completely control Donbass Oblast for the war to be over. Kherson and Zaporizhia are mostly in Russian control as well, while the peninsula of Crimea is heavily defended, as its proximity to Odessa provides some vulnerability from NATO. The strength of Russia and China, along with the self-determination of Iran and Venezuela, and the inclusion of Burkina Faso in our worldwide leadership of decolonialism, suggest that the imperial days of the United States are set to expire soon. Special Procedures, United Nations Human Rights Council. United Nations experts condemned coercive intervention in Venezuela by the United States. Geneva, 20 October 2025. Covert action and threats of using armed force against the government of Venezuela by the United States violate Venezuela's sovereignty and the United Nations Charter, United Nations experts said today. These actions also violate the fundamental international obligations not to intervene in the domestic affairs or threaten to use armed force against another country, the experts said. These moves are an extremely dangerous escalation with grave implications for peace and security in the Caribbean region. They noted reports of a significant United States military buildup already underway in the Caribbean, and that the recent announcements by the President of the United States follow a series of lethal operations by United States forces targeting vessels of the Venezuelan coast, alleged to have been involved in narcotics trafficking. Even if such allegations were substantiated, the use of lethal force in international waters without proper legal basis violates the international law of the sea and amount to extrajudicial executions, the experts said. Preparations for covert or direct military action against another sovereign state constitute an even graver breach of the United Nations Charter. The United States President has listed the organized crime group Trendy Aragua, among others, as a terrorist organization and alleged it is invading the United States. United Nations experts have previously condemned these strikes as violations of international law, considering that these groups are not attacking the United States and there is therefore no right to self-defense. Article 2, paragraph 4 of the Charter prohibits the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. Any attempt to impose regime change by external means also infringes upon the right to self-determination as recognized in Article 1 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, ratified by the United States in 1992. The long history of external interventions in Latin America must not be repeated, the experts said. The lessons from history must be learned and not repeated. The international community must stand firm in defending the rule of law, dialogue, and the peaceful settlement of disputes. The experts urged the United States to cease unlawful attacks and threats, respect international law, and reaffirm its commitment to multilateralism and the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter. They have been in contact with the government of the United States regarding their concerns. The experts are George Katrogalos, independent expert on the promotion of a democratic and equitable international order, Ben Saul, special rapporteur on the promotion and protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms while countering terrorism, Maurice Tidbally Binns, special rapporteur on extrajudicial, summary, or arbitrary executions.